James, talking about his book Golf Tough and answering some other questions about golf psychology. Thanks for coming on, Dan.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right, so just straight in there. How would you help a player that's going through a hard time in their personal life still keep their performance levels on the course?
It can be quite challenging, you know. It's really about helping players compartmentalise their thinking, their challenges. I might be helping a player deal with some off-course challenges, going through a counselling process, if you like. And we're doing that away from the golf course. We're doing that maybe in the comfort of his or her own home or a place of convenience to them. And we're compartmentalising that challenge there. I think it's almost a cliche to say now in sport that the court or the course or the pitch must be the haven for the athlete who's struggling through personal problems. It's a cliche because it's so correct. You know, you have to compartmentalise and have that player, that athlete, that tennis player or golfer or whoever it might be, when they get on the court or the course or the pitch in golf, on the golf course, you're focused on those performance strategies. You're focused on getting the ball in the hole, essentially. So it really is that case of having the conversation about the private life away from the course, finding solutions for that on the golf course, finding solutions for their game. It can be tricky, it can be tough. One spills over into the other one. But that process is about helping them stay focused on their game, and that, as part of my job, is what I'm trying to do. Well, interestingly, the latest scientific evidence says that it's really, really important for players to think effectively whilst injured and as they're rehabilitating, because what we know in science is that if they're going through stress, if they're thinking ineffectively, if they're anxious, then they're releasing a hormone called cortisol. Now, what cortisol does is it slows down rehabilitation. So they can't necessarily come back onto the golf course, onto the practice ground quickly enough. So my job when a player is injured is to help him or her think effectively, probably mentally rehearse their best rounds, their best games every single day. And the beauty of golf, being the slightly sedentary sport that it is, and I've had this many a time, whereby injured golfers can often practice their short game. And that's often what you're promoting for golfers, is this idea of putt, chip, maybe some short pitches if they can. I've known many golfers to come back after a layoff due to injury and actually score really well. Why? Because for a few months they've just been dedicated to practicing their short game. But in and around that, my job as a sports psychologist is helping players think effectively off the golf course. That's imperative. They have to squash those negative thoughts. It's crucial.
Players can build up external strategies to build their confidence, such as fast cars, big houses, etc. What do you think would happen if you stripped that back and they just gave them a set of golf clubs? Would some of the top players, do you think, still be where they are without their ego backing them up?
I think external, extrinsic motivators play a part in champions. You know, they help develop and create champions. Without those external motivators, sometimes there isn't that motivation there. But without a shadow of a doubt, what I'm trying to help with players is promote the idea of mastery, the idea of learning, of developing, of improving, of them being passionate about being as good as they can be in every department of the game. If you're not that, you're not going to be good enough. You're not going to be good enough to win the cash prize. You're not going to be good enough to have the big house, the big car. And look, to sustain it, you have to be passionate about golf, and you have to be passionate about your golf. And really the way to do that is to scaffold things down and make sure that the player is focused on their statistics, improving their statistics, make sure that they're focused on developing the areas they need to improve, make sure they thrive and magnify their strengths. But above all, the message is learn, develop, improve, no matter what happens. No matter what happens in your career, learn, develop, improve every single day. You can't go wrong then. As I shift their focus on all I can expect of myself is to work hard every single day to learn, to improve, to develop. And all I can expect of myself in a tournament is to manage my mindset, to control myself, to be the best me that I can be. And that might sound kind of cliche and kind of cheesy, but that's all that you can do. Yeah, as lead psychologist for England Golf, this is a challenge I see quite often, because you're working with players who are about to take the transition between amateur and professional, and it is a huge transition, and psychologically it's tough because you go from the top end of the ladder like a big fish in a small pond to the bottom end of the ladder most often, and being a small fish in a big pond, and that can be mentally tough. It can cause stress and anxiety, self-doubt, often feelings that these golfers haven't faced for many years because simply they were the best juniors and they were the best amateurs in the country. They got everything thrown at them through their national training scheme. Now they're out there on their own. So first and foremost, it's about having a great team around them. A golfer these days has to have a great team, from the coach through to parental support, through to friends, through to maybe a sports psychologist, personal trainers. You've got to have a great team around you. You've got to strip your game down to focusing on the statistics, the areas you need to improve, as well as working on the areas that are already good, because that sustains your confidence level. Bad results out there, you're going to have some tough time. And then practice. Dedicate yourself to focusing on practice. You get that tap right every single day, you're going to give yourself a great chance. You may not make it, but you're going to give yourself the best opportunity.
Definitely. Brilliant. So, I mean, a very broad question right now. What common mistakes do you see amateurs make that could easily be changed? I mean, I'm talking, the club golfers. What sorts of things can they do to really try and get their scores down?
It certainly is a broad question, and I document a lot of this stuff in Golf Tough, which is written for golfers of all standards. First section is the practice section. I did something a little bit different with this book, Golf Tough. I decided to start with how to practice effect. So I've been a professional golfer myself. I've coached the game. I've spent thousands of hours on the practice tee. I've spent thousands of hours on the golf course, and I'm a big believer that as a golf psychologist, you've got to get out there on the golf course. You've got to get out there on the practice ground, and you've got to put it into practice out there. And that's a big part of it. And now, don't get me wrong, yes, I do sit down with a cup of tea with clients and talk through some things, but I'm passionate about demystifying this area, and I'm passionate about getting out on the golf course and getting out on the practice ground and doing stuff out there, because that's where the action takes place. That's where you have to implement this stuff, and that's what Golf Tough is all about. Being tough out on the golf course, under pressure. So that's what I'm trying to do when I work with clients. That's how I'm trying to help clients. Hopefully the proof is in the pudding with my results in the years to come.
Definitely. So I know you do things like you're on the end of the phone for if anybody ever needs any advice. You call them, you go out on the course with them, you practice. You're on the practice ground. You go everywhere, don't you? You really make sure you nail, and you're there for your customer, your client, rather than just a one-off session. It's far more empowering and yeah. What
I try to do is I rather than doing a one-off, I work on a monthly basis. So if somebody comes to work with me, I work over the course of a month, one-to-one, and then by phone and text. I try to immerse that golfer in the process of change. And if that's too much for somebody, then that's fine, and maybe I'm not the best person for them. But I want to help them improve. I know people are passionate about golf, they're passionate about their golf game, and I'm passionate about helping them improve. Well, how do you do that? You don't do that by spending an hour with somebody, shaking their hand and waving goodbye. You do that by being on the ground level with them, understanding them as a golfer, understanding what they need to do to improve, and then reinforcing it constantly over the course of a month or for however long they want to work with me. I think that is the best way to get better.
Fantastic, I totally agree, and that's why I wanted to really get that message across. Now, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do so?
It's really a case of going on my website, danabrahams.com. From there, there's an inquiry form. Pop an inquiry form through to me with some details, and we'll go from there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on, and we'll look forward to working with you again soon.
Thanks very much.